Hello YouTubers! I will be going through this week's games, review last week's tips and leaderboard of our footy tip comp, and also go through my Brownlow Votes for season 2025. Let's look at my Brownlow Votes after round 6. In top spot on 11 votes, we got B. Smith, Geelong. What a good recruit for the Cats. Doing magnificent well. Picked up 3 votes, which I gave for him, on the Easter Monday game between Hawthorn. And 2 players on equal 10 votes are N. Dacos, Collingwood, and Z. Merritt, Essendon. And in full spot on 9 votes is L. Whitfield, GWS Giants. These are my top 4 for the 2025 Brownlow Votes after round 6. My tips that I scored for round 6 did not that well, and on this scoreboard there's an error. Geelong Cats beat Hawthorn Hawks on Easter Monday. Therefore, looking at the 9 games, I only tipped 4 correct. Carlton, Essendon, the Crows and Bulldogs. Not good. 4 out of 9, that's less than 50%. Not good enough. Let's see the leaderboard after round 6. In top spot, you got Patrick L. 32 on 37 votes. Then you got me and Potter 1 at 35 votes respectively. And in 4th spot, I am Hacks on 33 votes. And in 5th spot, Red Dead Redemption on 32 votes. That's the top 5 for the Talking Everything AFL footy tipping game for season 2025. Let's see how I go for round 7, or who I'm going to tip in round 7, I should say. Alright, let's go, come on. Before we continue, I would like to ask for a very small favour. If you enjoy this AFL content, please take a sec to subscribe to the channel and like the video. That would be awesome. Okay, let's return back to the show. The first game of the week, the traditional Anzac Eve that's played over a number of years, is between Melbourne Demons and Richmond. Melbourne had their first win and they beat the Dogs by 10 points last week, whereas Richmond had an upset win over the underfit Gold Coast Suns by 11 points. So both teams go into this game with a win each from last week. The players in the mix for the Demons are Howes, Fritz, Henderson and Van Rooyen. For the Tigers, their players in the mix are Sonsei, Brewer and Gray. The players injured for the D's are Hoare, Lever, McAdam, Moitz Wakefield and May. The players injured for the Tigers are Biglis, Armstrong, Clark, Gibcus, Houghton, Lofu, Mansell, McAuliffe, Prestier and Young. Just looking at both sides, they've got the same amount of experienced players playing on the field, i.e. for Richmond you got Molson, Bolter, Broad, Shaw, Hopper, Lynch, Nankervis, Durrant and McIntosh. For the Demons you got Gorn, Petrarca, Sparrow, Pickett, Winey, Langland, Petty, McDonald and Oliver. Both sides have the same amount of experienced players playing on the field and equivalent in youngsters. Where the game will be won at, as I mentioned earlier of the experienced players, the two teams are pretty even. However, the only deciding factor I chose was, I don't know from Richmond who's going to stop Cozzy Pickett, and therefore I'm going to just tip Melbourne just to win this game. Both teams had a good win last week and their lineups are pretty even, but Melbourne has the X factor of Cozzy Pickett and wouldn't just choose Melbourne Demons to beat the Tigers. The next game is the traditional Anzac Day game between Collingwood and Essendon Bombers. Collingwood had a magnificent win over the Lions at the Gabba last week, where they beat the Lions by 52 points, and the Bombers had a 2-point win away at West Coast, so both teams won last week. Good wins. The players in the mix for the Magpies are Houston, back from suspension to begin, Membray, Sutherland and Markov. For the Bombers, 34-year-old Goldstein, Tazastas, Langford and Levine. The players injured for the Maggies are Harrison, Johnson, McInnes, Mitchell and Schultz. For the Bombers, they'll be missing the 2 ruckmans in Brian, Draper and other players that are injured are Caldwell, Clark, Cox, Edwards, Golfy and Parrish. Long injury list for the Bombers. Where the game will be won at, it's the midfield of the two sides. For Collingwood, you've got Cameron, Long, N. Dacos, Chris Cripps, Sideblood and Lipinski. For the Bombers in ruck, you got 34-year-old Goldstein to play his first game of season 2025, and Merritt, Durham, Setterfield, Shield and Roberts. Just look at the two teams' midfield and ruck setup. I expect the Magpies to dominate this position, and therefore I'm going to tip Collingwood to beat Essendon Bombers. Too many numbers in the midfield. They're going to have a lot of inside 50, and got the class of the two Dacos brothers, and Collingwood going to kick a higher scoring and beat the Bombers. The next game is between Fremantle Dockers and the Adelaide Crows, played on Anzac evening at Western Australia at Optus Stadium. Fremantle had a disappointing 10-point loss at the Melbourne Demons last week, and the Crows won a wind-affected rain, bad condition game against the Giants, 18 points at Adelaide Oval last week. It's a good win for the Crows. They can win in a scrappy game. The players in the mix for the Dockers are Erasmus, Reddy, Aish and Narkle. For the Crows, their players in the mix are Pitting, back from suspension, Pedler, Butts, Shaw, Murphy and Rochelle if he passes a fitness test. The players injured for the Dockers are Five, Jackson, Jones, O'Driscoll, Sturt, Moss is suspended, Wagner, Walker and Walters. For the Crows, they'll be missing Toby Murray and Strawman, and potentially Fogarty with a shoulder injury. He'll be assessed midweek. Where the game will be won at, it's the midfield. For Fremantle, you got Darcy in ruck with gun midfielders of Sarong, Brayshaw. Then you have Sharp, Johnson and O'Meara. For the Crows, you got O'Brien in ruck, then Saligo, Crouch, Cumming, Dawson and Peatling. Just looking at the two teams' ruck midfield setup, Fremantle has more dynamic. Therefore, I expect Fremantle to have more inside 50s and provide enough inside 50s for their forwards of Tracy and Amos. And also, the Dockers will be smarting from that very disappointing 10-point loss against the Demons last week. And I want to just say Fremantle just to beat the Crows by 8 points. So I'll tip 3-0 to give the Crows the hee-ho. The next game of the week is between St Kilda Saints and the Brisbane Lions. St Kilda were very ordinary last week and lost to the Western Bulldogs by 71 points. And the Lions lost to Collingwood Magpies at home by 52 points. Both teams had bad losses last week. The players in the mix for the Saints are Boxshell, Boyd and Sean Maker. For the Lions, their players in the mix are McKenna, Robinson, Gardner, Foote and Marill. The players injured for the Saints are Butler, Carroll, Clark, Cordy, Thompson, Dow, Howard, King, Philippou. So many injuries for the Saints. For the Lions, they'll be missing Coleman, Lohman, McCarthy and Starcevich. Where the game will be won at, St Kilda will have a 6-day break, whereas the Lions, who played on the Thursday, has a 9-day break. But the game will be won in the midfield. In the midfield for the Saints, you got Marshall, McRae, Steele, Hill, Sinclair and Wood. For the Lions, you got McInerney, Dunkley, Neal, Ashcroft, Bailey and Berry. Just looking at the Lions' ruck midfield setup, it looks class. There's so many gun players in there. Neal, Dunkley, just awesome players that they have in the midfield, plus Ashcroft. I expect the Lions midfield to win a lot of clearances and probably enough inside 50 for their forwards. Therefore, I'm going to tip the Lions to beat the St Kilda Saints by 15 points. The next game played this week is between Port Adelaide Power and North Melbourne Kangaroos. Last week, Port Adelaide had a magnificent win over the Swans and won at Sydney by 8 points. North Melbourne, what can I say? Very, very disappointing on Good Friday, where it got smashed by Carlton, a margin of 82 points. Some poor football played on that day. The players in the mix for the Power are Richard, Finlayson and Berry. For the Kangaroos, their players in the mix are Teagle, Scott, Harman and Hanson Jr. The players injured for the Power are Anapostopoulos, Bergman, Burton, Lukosius, Marshall and Zert Thatcher. The Kangaroos will be missing Archer, Coleman Jones, George, Goda, Whitlock, that is Matt Whitlock. Where the game will be won at. North Melbourne got so many youngsters. They got 5 players that were taken in the top 5 draft pick that have played less than 50 games. And these players include your Sheasel, your Wardlaw, your McKercher, Dersma, just a number of youngsters that the Kangaroos have. Port Adelaide got good experienced players, Rosie, Bogue, Horn Francis, ex-North Melbourne player who won play well against this team. And just looking on paper, Port Adelaide Power has a magnificent roster. The Kangaroos had a bad loss. They've lost the last two by 120 plus points combined. And I expect the Power to beat the Melbourne Kangaroos. The next game is between GWS Giants and the Western Bulldogs, played in Canberra. Last week, the Giants lost to the Crows by 18 points in a poor, windy condition and wet game, whereas the Doggies, what can I say? They smashed the St Kilda Saints by 71 points. What an awesome game played by the Western Bulldogs. The players in the mix for the Giants are Angrove and League. The players in the mix for the Doggies are Buslinger, Gallagher and Porter. The players injured for the Giants are Angwin, Cogniglio, Daniels, Fahy, Hannaford and Smith. For the Doggies, they'll be missing Caulfield, Duray, Garcia, Harms, Scott, Trelaw, Waitman, Vandermeer, and now you can add Sam Darcy to this list. So many good players injured. Where the game will be won at, it's the Bulldogs forward line and the Giants defense. For the Doggies, in the forward line, they have O'Donnell, Sanders, West, Liver, Norton and McNeil. For the Giants in defense, you have Bynum, Taylor, Hilbert, Whitfield, Buckley and Ash. Just looking at the Doggies forward line, apart from Norton, who else is going to be there marking forward? The Giants have got quality players in defence and they have players that can run off like Ash or Whitfield. And just looking at the two teams and the number of injuries that the Doggies have, I'm going to take the Giants to beat the Western Bulldogs by 12 points. The next game of the week is between Gold Coast Suns and Sydney Swans. Last week, the Suns had a bad loss to the Richmond Tigers and they lost by 11 points, whereas the Swans also had a bad loss and lost to the Power at home by 8 points. The players in the mix for the Suns are Closey, Moore and Graham. For the Swans, their players in the mix are Patton, Mitchell and McDonald. The players injured for the Suns are Ballard, Berry, Buderick, Lombard and Swanlow. The Swans will be missing Adams, Amadi, Andrew, Cunningham, Detoy, Fox, Gordon, Mills, Papley. So many quality players out for the Swans. Where the game will be won at, it's the Swans forward line. McDonald played his first game in the VFL last week. I'm assuming that they'll have to rush him in due to players injured, i.e. Amadi and Co up forward. So just looking at the Swans forward line, you have Hayward, McCartan, McDonald, Jordan, McLean, Florent, and in defence for the Suns, you've got Powell, Collins, Orland, Rioli, Andrew and Noble. Just looking at that, I expect the Suns defenders to stop the Sydney Swans forward, and you're going to see a lot of run from halfback from your Noble and Rioli. And I expect the Suns to beat the Sydney Swans by 15 points, as the Swans are going to find it difficult to score enough goals and they'll need about 15 goals to win this game. So that's why I'm going to pick the Suns to beat the Sydney Swans. The next game of the week, played on a Sunday, is between Carlton and Geelong. Carlton had a magnificent win over the Roos by smashing them by 82 points, and Geelong had a brilliant Easter Monday win where they beat the Hawks by 7 points. The players in the mix for the Blues are Boyd, Pitnock, Dockley and Ben Camporelli. For the Cats, their players in the mix are Duncan, Bullshit and Mullen. The players injured for the Blues are Sinclair, Cohen, Fantasia, Camp, McKay, Newman and Jagger Smith. The players injured for the Cats are Hughes, Braun, Burke, Conway, Edwards, Guthrie, Henry, Hoffman, Ovicic, Martin, Matfoy and Moyler, plus Myers as well. Where the game will be won at, it's Carlton's full line and Geelong's defence. In the full line for the Blues, you got Walsh, Young, Durden, Williams, Kerner and Motlop. For the Cats in defence, you got Humphries, Stewart, Guthrie, Blickhouse, DeConning and O'Sullivan. Just looking at the two teams, because they got injuries to McKay and no Kemp up forward, there's only one marking forward in Kerner, and I just can't see Cowan kicking 15 plus goals, unlike the performance where they kicked 153 points against the Kangaroos last week. But you're playing against Geelong, a good defence side, and I expect the Cats to restrict Blues to less than 15 goals, and I'm going to tip Geelong to beat Carlton on a Sunday. The next game is between Hawthorn Hawks and West Coast Eagles, played at Marble Stadium on the Sunday arvo. Hawthorn lost to Geelong Cats by 7 points on the Easter Monday Classic, and the Eagles lost to Essendon Bombers by 2 points. The players in the mix for the Hawks are Rees, Sarong, Huswick and McGuinness. For the Eagles, their players in the mix are Long, Williams and Brock. The players injured for the Hawks are Day, Deere, McDonald, Nash and Lewis. For the Eagles, they'll be missing Chesser, Jamson, Sheed and Yo. Where the game will be won at. Just look at the two rosters. West Coast is in a rebuilding mode. So many youngsters. Hawthorn, they're in the premiership window, expected to be in the top 4 by end of this season and making preliminary final at a minimum. And just looking at the two teams on paper, I expect Hawthorn to absolutely beat West Coast by a big margin. I say 50 plus points. And also Hawthorn have been smarting because they've lost the last 2 games in a row to Geelong and the Power. So I don't expect the Hawks to lose 3 in a row. Therefore, I pick the Hawks. My teams that are selected for round 7 are the D's to beat the Tigers, Collingwood and Fremantle to win on Anzac Day, the Lions to beat the Saints, the Power, Giants and Suns to win all their home games, the Cats to beat the Blues, and Hawks to beat West Coast Eagles. Thank you for watching my video, and it will be appreciated if you can subscribe and comment to my videos. Hopefully you enjoyed my video, and see you next time. Cheers or bye.